Imagine a world where the warmth of a family dinner masks the cold grip of betrayal, where the laughter of friends camouflages the whispers of envy, and where the neighbor's friendly smile conceals a venomous intent. This twisted reality we will confront tonight. Join me with my guest, Richard Estep, as we delve into the depths of human depravity, exploring the harrowing stories of murder most foul, perpetrated by not just strangers in the night, but by the very people who we share our lives with, homes and hearts. So buckle up, let's hit it. Hi, and welcome to Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader, and tonight we have a very special guest with us. We have Richard Estep, who is the author of a new book called Family, Friends, and Neighbors, Stories of Murder and Betrayal. Richard has written many a books from the paranormal all the way to true crime, and some of his books actually delve into both. So we'll definitely have to get Richard back on for that. I'd love to introduce you, Richard Estep. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Winnie.
Yes, it's great to have you on. You've been on my husband's show many of times talking about your paranormal um, books and things like that, but you also love true crime. And when I saw this book come across my email list, I was like, wow, Richard really has me, like, he knows exactly what I want for my show. So I had to get you on. Now, this book kind of goes down the road of not just these random murders or crimes that are happening, but they're within the home, people we're closest to. So why is most murders, when it comes to things like that, why are they so intertwined within family and friends and things like that? When you were going through these stories, what was kind of the consistency between them? Was it money? Was it envy? Was it jealousy? Was it rage? What were you kind of seeing when you were going through these cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd written a couple of books for the same publisher, Visible Ink, and I'd written about serial killers. And of course,
Mhm.
you know, as a society, as a culture, we're all very familiar with serial killers, and most of us recognize them on sight. But the truth is, you are far more likely to be killed by somebody you know, somebody you live with, a member of your own inner circle, than you are some Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy type. And I asked myself the same question: why might that be the case? So as I delved into some of them, um, the classic motivations for murder are usually romance, money, hatred, gain, things like that. And I think what it is in many of these cases, there were elements of financial gain. There were elements where somebody just have said, maybe we should get a divorce. Maybe we should
Mhm.
split. Quite why that didn't happen in some cases, I don't know. There were those rage-driven cases as well. And I think in a number of them, I think such enmity and hatred had grown between the killer and the victims. It had just reached a boiling point and was finally going to explode. Some cases there was also abuse going on, and the victim may have turned on their abuser.
Well, and looking through your book, we don't want to touch on everything because we want people to buy your book. But there was a couple of cases that really stood out to me that I followed really closely. Not because they were salacious, because I was trying to understand. And now, when you mentioned about abuse, one topic that, or one crime that comes to my mind is the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case.
Hmm.
Um, for me, her going to prison, I don't think was warranted because of the word abuse that you mentioned. I believe that she was emotionally, physically abused. And honestly, if you really look at it, her mom was trying to murder her for her whole life. She was giving her medications that she shouldn't be taking, causing her to have these physical ailments. Not all of them, but obviously, I mean, Gypsy wasn't even allowed to eat food. She was eating food through a tube,
Mm.
which she didn't need to. So I understand Gypsy's reason that that was her only way out because her mother was very controlling. I mean, Gypsy, if you really want to, I mean, you got to look at the case, but this mother lied about her age. Gypsy didn't even know how old she was. Excuse me. Gypsy also was told that she wasn't able to walk, so she sat in a wheelchair pretty much the first 18 years of her life, saying that she couldn't walk when she could. She was taking her to all these doctor's appointments, doing these procedures and medical things on her that were unnecessary. I think Gypsy would have benefited more from psychological care versus going to prison. That's just my opinion. But when you delved into that case, what kind of stood out to you about the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case?
Yeah, I think it's a tragic case in that you have to wonder what her life would have been like had she had any other parent than the one she got, had she had any other home situation. So I agree with you completely that she was in pretty horrific abusive circumstances. On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, you do have to ask the question, is the only way out then murder? And it was
Yeah.
a murder that she did manipulate somebody else into performing on her behalf, facilitating
Mm-hmm.
that. She ruined his life as much as her own, and
Oh, yeah.
he performed this murder at her behest. So you've really got two lives ruined, and of the two, kind of three individuals involved here, he's still in jail and likely to remain
Mm-hmm.
there. Her mom is of course dead, and Gypsy Rose is now out and making a storm on TikTok and getting a nose job was the last thing I saw in the news talking about that. So um, I just think it's awful all around, and
Yeah.
it's difficult to judge and it's difficult not to judge in cases like this. None of us know the full story,
Yeah.
and I think none of the people involved had clean hands, and I think all of them to a degree. Well, I don't know about her mother, but certainly Gypsy Rose there were some mitigating circumstances, absolutely. But at the end of the day, I
Yeah.
think, murder is murder, and she engineered
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, I know. And and that just kind of goes to like, I mean, I can't imagine what the psyche in me would be like when I find out all these things that I've known my whole life are a lie,
Mm,
and obviously, she felt like she needed to take matters into her own hands and she went the wrong route, but like you said, we don't know the full extent of the abuse in the house. Was
mm,
she really that closed off from the rest of the world that she couldn't tell a soul? I'm sure there's some things that, could play into part in that. But, cases like that. But then there's also cases of, like you mentioned, divorce. The
mm,
Christopher Watts case, for
yeah.
instance, popped into my head. Obviously, the Christopher Watts case, if you're unfamiliar with it, his wife, Shanann, I believe that's how you pronounce it,
Mm,
she was kind of a vocal influencer for, I believe I'm not exactly sure. She did have an autoimmune disease. I can't remember what, so I don't want to misquote myself. But so she had a very public life. She had two beautiful daughters and a husband, Chris, who she
mm,
loved and adored. And, she tried to kind of put on this facade of this perfect family on social media. But behind closed doors, she was struggling with her marriage
mm,
with Chris. And she was talking to friends and family about how she felt he doesn't love me. He doesn't touch me anymore. He doesn't, he's not engaged with me anymore. And come to find out, Chris was having an affair. And one night, Shanann and the girls go missing. And we all know how that turned out. Shanann and both her girls were murdered by Chris, Shanann's husband, and the girls' father because he didn't want to live that life anymore and wanted to
mm.
live it with his mistress. So it's like, how do you go from being married, starting a family, having an affair, killing your family so you can be with somebody else. I just, what is the psychology in that? I cannot wrap my head around it. Was there anything in the case that really stood out to you that kind of gave some clarity on that?
Something that's been brought up often, and I certainly am not the first to observe this, but I'm sure you've seen it. If you look back, and it's on YouTube, at the footage where appeals were being made, Shanann was missing at the time, and Chris Watts was, of course, playing along. We're very worried. There's something in the guy's eyes. There's something on his face. Like he's in this almost tranquilized kind of state. He's glazed. And I think that's the look of a man. There was a moment somewhere along, I don't care what he has to say either, because I think he's proven to be so untrustworthy. He'll say anything at this point. But I think there was a moment when the guy just snapped. In no rational, even if you're going to lose everything, if you're going to have a divorce, you're going to lose your house, you may or may not have access to your kids, you're going to lose your life savings and all that kind of thing. In what universe is that not, still the better alternative than murder, right?
Right.
So I can only assume that he snapped. I can only speculate that he just lost it during one of. We know that all was not well with their marriage. Things were certainly very troubled. Shanann worked hard to put up this this front, which many people do on social media. And it's understandable. It's the highlight reel, right? Most people kind of put on a bright smile and a sunny face, no matter what their problems. I think that was going on. I think there were probably a series of increasingly escalating arguments, and I think that he snapped. And at that point, having killed Shanann, he realized he'd gone too far. Even then, what just blows me, poor choice of words, what baffles me, what I cannot conceive, I can see how that would happen. Obviously, I don't advocate for it, right? It's awful. You're now a murderer. Congratulations. But to then go ahead and murder your children after that, no matter how much you might detest your spouse, no matter how much hatred you might feel for that person, right? At what point do you then turn on your own completely and utterly innocent children as well?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can think of, and like I said, I'm not there, but unless the girls walked in on him killing their mother, because like I said, that would be the only reason I would think he would want to.
Possibly, yeah. But then you're into that mindset of, as a parent, and I'm not a parent in the way that you are. My kids all have 4 legs, but still.
I
still don't understand how, even if the children walked in and saw this, do you not go, well, I messed that up badly. Dad's going to call the police now. At what point do you still decide you're going to snuff out these completely innocent lives that you made? That's beyond belief to me. I find it easier to understand a Dahmer or a Gacy or a Bundy who's doing this for kicks to strangers than I do anyone that can do that to their own children.
Well, and that brings me to another case that was, oh gosh, I can't even remember, but the Susan Smith case. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but she was having an affair with a man, and the man didn't want children. So instead of saying, you want to know what, you're not a life for me, I have kids, you don't want them, okay, part as friends. No, she puts her kids in the back seat of the car, straps them in, and then puts the car in neutral and pushes it into a lake. I mean, if Dave came to me tomorrow and said, you want to know it? If you don't get rid of your kids, we're done. I would tell Dave to see you bye. It's not worth. My kids are for my kids forever. I could not imagine putting my kids in a car, strapping them down, and putting them into a lake where they would drown to death. And drowning is, I can't. That's one of my fears. That I have a phobia of it. I can't imagine doing that to your children, as Chris supposedly smothered his children. Now go ahead.
Oh, and there are no new things under the sun. So one of the things I talk about in the book was Bodmin Jail back in the 1800s in the UK. I was investigating actually the history and haunting of the jail. But one of the famous tragic ghosts there, and her story broke my heart, is a lady called Selina Wadge. Selina was a single mom of 2 children, and she was absolutely on the poverty line in a way that we cannot conceive of today. You know, they were living rough. She was struggling to make ends meet, feed her children. She had a new boyfriend, and at least her version of the story was that one of her children was special needs, and he said, "I'll marry you and make an honest woman of you," as the saying was, but the kid has to go. And she ended up dropping him down a well, and was hanged for it, was executed for it at Bodmin jail. And she was placed in just this, I feel like, a situation where, you know, she had absolutely no life. Her kids had absolutely no life. They were literally starving on the streets. It still doesn't excuse it, but I can see the logic. I can understand how that might happen. You know, looking at some of the more contemporary cases, we're talking about people that had other options, other choices, other paths they could have taken, and instead chose to do something absolutely reprehensible.
Exactly. I know. And when that comes to the big elephant in the room, the Casey Anthony case. Poor little girl is the result of that. She's
Kaylee, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying not to cry. When I saw that little girl for the first time when the case broke, my son was the same age. And I looked at my son and I'm like, I don't know how anybody could do that, let alone a family member. Now, with the Casey Anthony case, it could be what family member did it is kind of up in the air. I have my own opinions. And I believe that she does know exactly what happened to her daughter. But to know that a family member, whether it's a child, a mother, a brother, a sister, are so disposable for their own needs is really scary. To know that even within a family, you can look at your sibling, your brother, sister, your dad, and look and be like, you're disposable. I can't grasp that, and it's a really hard thing for me to wrap my head around. So I do like to look at these kind of books and read them and kind of get a more insight on the psyche of these killers. Like, how could somebody do that? And with the Casey Anthony thing, it's kind of like you can't really pin it down because there's so many lies going around that, and of course the media played a huge role in the Casey Anthony case. And I think, you know, that's why a lot of people were shocked at the verdict. I was shocked not because of the verdict itself. I understand why it came back not guilty, because they did not prove her guilty at all. They couldn't tie her to the murder of her daughter.
Yeah, there was reasonable doubt in the eyes of a jury, and I understand that. They did, if I recall correctly, they did convict her on 4 counts of lying to police, which was, I think, a $4,000 fine and time served. But yeah, the lies were just flying back and forth thick and fast, weren't they? And as quickly as she moved to throw her father under the bus as well at trial. But this is someone that has not accepted responsibility for a thing in her life. You know, how do you wait so long to call the police? How do you invent this story about a maid that never existed, a babysitter that never existed? You know, lie after lie after lie after lie. How are you out partying with your own child missing? How are you, you know, engaging in like wet t-shirt contests when your own kid is presumably missing? If your story's correct, you should be worried out of your mind, right? Unless you know exactly what really happened and where your child is.
Well, but see, in the special that she did, she did say that Kaylee did drown in the pool, and that George found Kaylee, pulled her out, and said, "Look what you did."
Yeah.
So even after, if that's what happened, even 2 weeks after that, she's out partying, getting tattoos. I'm sorry, if my child drowned in a pool, I would call 911 and say this was an accidental drowning. It happens. It's sad. It's tragic, but it happens. Okay. Why not go that route? But see, that was going to make her look like a bad mother. It was going to affect her. So that's why I don't even think George was even there. I think it was her. Kaylee may have drowned, or my theory is that she was possibly using narcotics to put her child to sleep and
Mm-hmm.
accidentally gave her too much. But it's just, why come up with such a convoluted story unless it's going to make you look bad as a parent?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, because she got kidnapped. The babysitter took her. I was a good mom. I took her to her babysitter. The babysitter took her. So that's where I really feel that Casey Anthony is not hiding her cards that she's lying, because it's everything is about her. And with the media now, she's is she getting a reality show now?
That's apparently what's supposed to be happening. That's in the works, yeah. That she's pushing for a
Oh,
reality show, which is, and we're not just, we're talking about here's what she's doing now. This is not a show that attempts to exonerate her or goes over the issues again. This is her making a new life for herself. And
mm-hmm.
after the way she's behaved, innocent or not, I would not want to put a single dime in that woman's pocket. She behaved
Right.
awfully. Innocent or
Mm-hmm.
guilty, she behaved awfully. And it says something very negative about us as a society that we parade people like her on our TV screens.
Mm-hmm.
And that might come across as hypocritical from someone that writes a book, as I have, but I'm interested in dissecting these cases, how they occur, what can we do to avoid them if at all possible, what are the red flags we can look for,
Right. Yeah.
I work very hard to not make the books exploitative, sensationalistic, or anything like that. And it kind of breaks my, I'm more upset 2 weeks after having finished a book like this than she appeared to be after having lost her daughter. Like, it stays
Right.
with you. It stays
I
with you.
know.
But if you have a shred of empathy, it's going to. And I think there is not a shred of empathy in Casey Anthony's art for anybody but Casey Anthony.
Oh, I cried almost every night. I was so glued. I was so fascinated by the case. And a lot of I wish I remembered the little girl's name. She went missing around the same time they were looking for Kaylee in Florida. I'd have to follow up on that story. That was actually an interesting story because she was about the same age as Kaylee, and the same circumstances kind of happened.
Yeah.
She disappeared, and it was just very weird how those cases were like going at the same time in the same state. But media plays a huge part. I mean, they sensationalize these people. I mean, and that's why a lot of these, when you see school shootings and stuff, one of the things they always say in their manifesto is that they want to be remembered. And of course, the media just, plasters them all over the place. A lot of times when Dave would have to report on anything like that, he wouldn't even say the guy's name. And I agree. I don't want to say, I would hate, if I didn't have to see Casey Anthony ever again, I'd be a happy person.
Right.
But, the media does play a huge part. And it plays a huge part in these trials, too, because, I don't know. I feel like our justice system is really kind of teetering on, kind of going downward. And I feel that the media and social media and all that play a huge part in it. Now, going through some other topics in your book, one of the ones that caught my eye that was way, way far back, Mary Ann Cotton. Was she kind of like, she was this woman who used poison. She was kind of was she the first one that kind of was documented as being like this Black Widow type of serial killer using poisons and things like that? Because that's what we always associate with women.
Yeah.
Women's serial killers is poisoning, things like that. And it's usually for men to get their money, to get life insurance policies, and then move on. So that was kind of the case with Mary Ann Cotton. What did you come across with her case that you found that was like really fascinating and kind of different from today's cases?
Well, what I found fascinating about it was that arsenic was the key poison in this particular case, and back in those days, arsenic was everywhere. You could find arsenic as easily as you could find Tylenol today. So this was a woman who, how can I put it? Like, there were suspicions even at the time, hey, don't get too close to her because people have a habit of dying off around Mary Ann Cotton.
Right.
But there was no like definitive conclusive proof. I think she was someone who didn't enjoy killing. She was removing obstacles. from her way, which was kind of a H.H. Holmes sort of thing, you know.
Yep.
She liked latching onto men that had money, and if they happened to have children, and she became a new stepmom. Look out, kids! Don't let stepmom cook for you, you know. So
Right.
I always am very careful to look at cases with females, because I think throughout history, women have gotten the rough end of the stick. People are more likely to jump to conclusions, I think, with females than with males. This goes all the way back to, like, just as a quick side trip, I was just in Salem, Massachusetts, and researching the witch trials. And you look at the number of quote unquote witches that were female and were economically poor, and you look at the fact that males were leading the charge here to oppress them, you know. So I always try and give a female a little extra scrutiny as a potential suspect. But in this case, it comes down to the math, you know. In the military, there's an old saying that, you know, once is unfortunate, twice is a coincidence, three times is enemy action, right? In other words, if you get bushwhacked three times, you're not unlucky. They're reading your mail. There's an agent provocateur going on. And with Marianne Cotton, so many of her family members started dying off under these same circumstances. It's like, I'm sorry, you know, you were poisoning the heck out of these people. There's no real reasonable doubt. And yet there are people that to this day still maintain that she was unfairly vilified. There are people that will defend her.
Wow. Well, you know, it's one of those things too. Even back then, though, I mean, granted, more than likely she was killing off her family members, but also too, a lot of people didn't understand medical ailments either. And so, like, I've known it were mysterious deaths of this whole family. Come to find out, you know, they all had a genetic disorder that, you know, caused a heart defect, and they all died by the time they were 13 or something like that. We got to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to discuss a case that I was unfamiliar with, but I find super intriguing because it involves a 14-year-old boy and a soap opera, the Coronation Street Killing. We'll be right back with Richard Estep right here on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.
Oh, my little darklings. Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness is out, and it's available right now. And I would love for you to pick up a copy of my brand new book. You can get it on Amazon wherever you live in this great, big, wonderful world of ours. Or if you'd like to get an autographed copy and you live here in the United States, go to paranormal60.com. We have the standard copy, non-autographed, just $20. Signed copy, only $30. And not only do we have this book, but we have my other book, The Other Side. And right now I'm running a special. If you pick up both books, you can get both books for $40, both signed. Both will be shipped in one package for one price. So go check out all the information at paranormal60.com. The Other Side, a teen's guide to ghost hunting and the paranormal, which is a guide on ghost hunting and the paranormal. Or you can get Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, real life encounters with the supernatural. And not only are they some of my all-time favorite stories from you, but there's a few of my favorite stories that have happened to me in the book as well. So go check it out, paranormal60.com, to order your copies, or you can buy copies wherever you are in the world that are unsigned at amazon.com. And I'll ask you this. Many of you have supported me in buying this book already. If you could just take 30 seconds to rate and review this book on Goodreads or on amazon.com, I would greatly appreciate it, because the more we get of good ratings and reviews, the more they expose this book to a wider, bigger audience. So I would appreciate that as a personal favor to me, your pal, Dave Schrader.
Or something like that. But speaking of children, too, I was going through and I came across Daniel, is it Bartlam? Is that how you pronounce his last name?
I do believe so.
And now he was 14 at the time that he decided to bludgeon his mother to death with a hammer. So I'm not very familiar with this case. So if you want to kind of give me some insight on it, because I'm fascinated, I am going to read up on this, because it's not very common for a 14-year-old boy to bludgeon his mother to death with a hammer.
Now, if I recall correctly, was this the Coronation Street killer?
Yes.
So Coronation Street is like the longest running and most popular soap opera in the UK. My
Oh,
own
really?
dear mom, God bless her soul, religiously watched it. Some of my very earliest memories, in fact, are the theme tune of that show.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and it's been running for years and years and years and years. So what was kind of unique about this is that it was a copycat murder of a teenager that brutally murdered his mother in a way that mimicked the storyline of this immensely popular soap opera that kind of gripped the nation.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a real example of life imitating art, as it were. Uh, and,
Right?
and so, we have this age-old debate, don't we? Do video games cause violence? Do movies cause violence? And so on and so forth. And that's a debate that's as old as the hills. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I think the young man got the idea from that show, but then what about the millions of teenagers who watched that show that didn't bludgeon their parents to death?
Exactly. What flips that switch? Because there are people that, if you say, okay, a child abuse,
Hmm.
you can have two children that have, you know, two children living in the same home dealing with the same abuse, and one child will go on a murderous rampage and become a criminal, and the other one will become a lawyer
Hmm.
or something where's that switch being turned on, and why is it only in certain people and not others? Have you come across any information kind of delving into all these types of crimes?
I think we all actually have that threshold in us, the ability
Hmm.
to kill. I mean, if we didn't have it, the military would be out of business, right? Um,
Right.
but the military is in the business of depersonalizing and retraining you.
Hmm.
And even then, I think it's very different. So I want to put that to one side. I don't want to equate military service with murder. But what I will say is that we all have certain provocations, certain circumstances, I think, in which we could be driven to kill. As a
Hmm.
personal example, harm one of my dogs or cats. I'm pretty sure I could kill you in cold
Hmm.
blood right then and there. In fact, every time I see a story of animal abuse, it makes me want to find the person that did it and twist their head off at 180 degrees.
Right.
Never have for any police officers who may be watching,
Yeah.
but I understand it. I understand.
Yeah.
And I think what it is that the vast majority of us, of course, we understand consequences. We understand that, hey, if you actually give in to that impulse, which can be very strong in some cases, if you actually give into it, enjoy life behind bars forever because your life is over. Everything's being taken from you. There is that deterrence. I think in cases like this, there is a disconnect between reality and fantasy. I think that the idea that, hey, you do this, you are going to be caught. It is going to essentially dictate how the rest of your life goes. You probably shouldn't do it. That just wasn't there. And the great
Yeah.
debate, Winnie, is, nature versus nurture, right? We see this with all
Hmm.
kinds of killers, especially serial killers. Are they, as you pointed out, there are cases in which some of them were raised in the most abhorrent, abusive backgrounds with other kids who did not go on to murder. Look at the children of Fred and Rose West in England, for example. The Cromwell Street House of Horrors. The fact that
Hmm.
those children um, did as well as they did is just amazing, and they suffered, they struggled. On the other hand, you look at some serial killers, like say Dr. Harold Shipman, the UK's most prolific serial murderer, hundreds of people dead, all with a lethal injection. Shipman was mommy's boy. He grew up the apple of his mother's eye, was privileged, didn't want for anything. Hardly the
Hmm.
kind of environment that we would think would breed a killer. So I think it's a combination of bad wiring inside the brain and the perfect storm of circumstances. You have to have the two of them in order for this to happen.
You look at all these cases, it seems like a consistency throughout all these is our mental illness. Like it
Hmm.
seems like a lot of these people had traumatic, PTSD from abuse or, something in their life that really traumatized them to the point where it changed their whole psyche, and things like that. Now, have there been any cases that you would never touch, or ones that you really want to kind of get your hands in there and investigate yourself for a future, book or something down the road that you're really looking forward to hopefully one day getting to cover?
The John Benet Ramsey case came very close to being in this book.
Hmm.
The fact that I've worked in Boulder for quite a few years, although I no longer do, it hits very kind of close to home, and that's such a tragic case because you have the
Hmm.
loss of a child, but also it remains one of the great unquestioned, the question hangs over us exactly what happened here and how.
Hmm.
And it's one that is still very hotly debated today. People become very emotional debating the suspects, debating their timelines and personal theories as to what happened. So I would like to take a good, dispassionate look at that case, if at all possible. It's one I think
Hmm.
that needs further scrutiny, and my actual suspicion is that that one will be solved somewhere down the line with DNA evidence, which is still on file with the coroner's office. I think that one will be definitively solved.
Well, it's one of those things. It just seems like there's just more layers keep
Hmm.
adding to the story, and
Yeah,
because I mean, I think at one point they were looking for these guys, a guy living in some trailer or
yep.
RV or something that they even possibly could have tied it to the Zodiac killer. I'm like, what is happening? What's going on? I saw this one special. I'm like, that's kind of far fetched, but
Well,
I get
but
it.
Winnie,
You
the key thing also, I mean, you're a parent yourself,
know?
um, and I don't know who killed John Benet Ramsey. I don't know at all, so I don't have an opinion, an intelligent opinion on that yet. But I will say this, in cases of child murder, of course, suspicion always falls on the parents. If the parents are innocent, then the fact that they are not exonerated is a double tragedy for them, because not only have they lost their child, their world, but they also are being given side eye by everyone they ever meet for the rest of their lives, which is what happened to the Ramseys, you
Oh
know.
yes, yes.
So if they did it, or if one of them did it, or whatever, then that posthumous justice is better than no justice. But if they didn't, their names
Mhm.
need to be cleared, and as it stands at present, there is still some doubt. So the fact that their reputations are still hanging in the balance, I think we have to consider that every bit as much as we do justice for the victim.
Well, yeah, because yeah, I mean, it's sad that, Patsy is no longer alive,
Mm-hmm.
to really kind of get the gratification of clearing her name, I guess you would say. Um,
Probably vindication, I would go with, but yeah, you're right,
yeah.
because it's awful either way, right? It's awful
It
either
is.
way.
It was like they were trying to throw people's names out there in that case, just
Hmm.
seeing which one would stick, and it's just like, why would they go through this convoluted thing just to kill their daughter on Christmas Day? And they were going on vacation the next day. It was just so weird.
So
And,
much doesn't
a
add
lot
up
of
about that case.
right, and like there was a lot of evidence that was not even made public, even though the police were cherry picking certain evidence. They weren't putting out all the
Mhm.
evidence, and they missed a lot of evidence that
And
actually
contamination was an
points.
issue too.
Yeah, they missed a lot of evidence that actually points to a possible intruder or somebody
Hmm.
already in the home hiding
Yeah.
when they got home from that Christmas party. Is there a case that you have covered that you were pretty shocked and blown away by? Because you are a paramedic in fire
Yeah.
and rescue, is that correct? So you see
Correct.
a lot, a lot of stuff going on and the craziness of the world. So what case kind of gave you that feeling?
If you're not familiar with this case, Nancy Crampton Brophy was a lady that wrote a number of steamy kind of erotica kind of books with Navy SEALs and women. Um,
Mm.
and she had also, those books are still out there on Amazon too. And she had also written an article called How to Murder Your Husband and Get Away with It. And then her husband turned up dead, shot in the university. He was a chef, and so he taught culinary school. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, he was shot front and back one morning, and her car was seen on security cameras cruising by the facility like a few minutes beforehand.
Oh.
So, the police delved into her history, and she'd purchased ghost guns. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term.
Mm-mm.
A ghost gun is a gun where instead of buying a gun which is identifiable by its parts number and trackable, you buy bits and pieces of a gun and you make a gun out of it. So
Oh,
it
I gotcha.
yeah, so it's essentially an untraceable gun. She'd ordered components for one, and when detectives asked her about it, she said, "Oh, research for my next book. I'm not going to write an article called How to Murder Your Husband and Get Away with It and then murder my husband, am I? And the prosecutor says, yes, you are, you did, and you're going to jail. So,
Okay.
yeah, so whether she's guilty or not, I don't know, but she certainly was convicted. And just the idea that a writer may have done that, after having written about it, it would be, my wife and I joke about this all the time, they always look at the spouse first, right? I can only imagine how much harder they would look if that spouse has the browser history that I do and has written
Right.
and has put out the kind of books that I put out. Like, it's not exactly going to challenge the detectives, is it? So it just kind of seemed ironic. And I'm not making light of the fact that that man is dead at all.
I
There was
know, but I know.
yeah, but the discrepancies were interesting. Like the life insurance was disproportionately high on him. There were financial worries. There were all the means, motive, and opportunity were all there. So
Hmm.
I kind of wondered, actually, as I was following the case, will she be convicted, or will the jury not believe this? That was one that really seemed, again, it was life mirroring fiction, as it were.
Yeah, and like I said, with OJ, he did the opposite. Like
Hmm.
once he was acquitted, then he wrote a book saying that if he were to
Hmm.
murder Nicole, this is how he would have done it,
Hmm.
which was kind of very much in the vein of how it happened. But anyway,
But yeah, you want to talk about the ultimate bad taste, right? I mean, whether you believe O.J. Simpson was innocent or not, and I certainly have my
yeah.
own strong feelings on that, as I'm sure everybody watching this does. You know,
Oh yeah.
let's just for one moment say that he was innocent. To do
Okay.
what he did for any reason is so distasteful. It's so just gross that you're an
I know.
appalling human being for doing it.
Right? And especially knowing that they have children together. Your children could read
Hmm.
this book, OJ, about how you, if you would have killed their mother,
Hmm.
this is how you would have done it. It just, it. And last but not least, we have Amityville. Yes, the DeFeo murders. Now, I know this has been kind of overblown and things like that, especially when it comes to the paranormal aspect of it, which that's not why we're here tonight. Tonight, we are here to talk about that particular case because of how it affected not only the DeFeo family, but the family that purchased that home, the Lutz family, and how that particular case impacted even the family to this day. Christopher Lutz and his siblings, how they're impacted still being attached to the Amityville horror house. So, what did you kind of uncover when you started digging into the DeFeo case?
Well, one of the more interesting claims is you look at that case, you look at the fact that Butch DeFeo, um, again, a proven liar, so you always have to question his word. One of the more interesting claims he made was that he had an accomplice, and that accomplice was his sister. Um,
Yeah.
and his claim is that his sister murdered the children and he killed her after they both had killed their parents. He supposedly killed her after he found out that she had murdered their other siblings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there is some evidence. You could interpret some of the evidence to support that contention on his part. But the big tragedy with Amityville, beyond the murders themselves, I think, is the multi-million, if not billion-dollar industry at this point, which continues to
Mm-hmm.
capitalize on it. And I think, the fact that the DeFeos were a family, that they had their issues like any other family. The root motivation there, I think, was the absolute animosity between Butch DeFeo and his father. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Butch had pointed a gun into his dad's face before then, pulled the trigger, and it had not gone off. And after that, his father had found religion pretty quickly. He thought it was a miracle that he wasn't killed. And I think they knew that they had this potential monster living under their roof after that point. But what's most tragic, as I said, is the way it just continues to be exploited.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all blood money. That's all on the back of what happened to the DeFeo family.
I can't fathom killing somebody, especially when it's somebody that's close to me that either I gave life to or gave life to me. I just don't understand that whole aspect. But one thing that I do want to touch that you do have in your book, and me being a domestic abuse survivor, this is very important to me. And this is what I'm talking about. When you see something in family happening, whether it's abuse, whatever, there are places that you can call and reach out and get help, and there are resources. And I looked in the back of your book, and you have a good amount of resources for people, and I did put a couple in our program guide that people
Thank
can
you.
quickly access. But some of them I do want to touch to the Center for Domestic Abuse. You can call them. There's hotline numbers. There's websites you can go to. They even have a text number where you can kind of covertly text somebody to say when you do need help, because I know exactly what that's like. But having resources, when you look at that, how many of these cases could have been prevented if these type of resources were out there? And not only do you have just resources for domestic abuse, you have resources for the LGBTQ community. You have resources for Latino community, for the Asian community. So that way everybody feels like they have a safe place they can go, right?
Yeah, I think that, one doesn't want to stereotype, but looking at the data, so many of these crimes began as domestic violence incidents, which escalated and escalated and escalated. So many of them were performed by a very angry male. Let's call it what it is, guys. Males are angry. Testosterone is a thing. And as I'm going through the case literature, as I'm going through the court transcripts, as I'm going through the documents and the testimony when I'm writing these books, over and over again, you see these points at which they're off ramps, Winnie. Had somebody intervened at just one of these off ramps, people would have lived.
Right.
It's very rare that these came completely spontaneously out of the blue. So, recognizing the signs and symptoms of abuse in somebody else or in your own life is essential, and understanding that, these individuals generally don't change. These individuals generally are going to escalate and escalate, and that pattern often ends in homicide and tragedy. There are resources out there that can help. So if anyone's first of all, if anyone's watching this and can't afford the book, send me a message at my email address, richard@richardestep.net. I will email you the full list of resources to you. Okay, no questions asked. But help is available, and if only some of the more contemporary cases had interventions, they wouldn't have been in my book, and I would have loved them not to have been in my book.
Right. Well, I thank you so much for all your hard work, Richard. We'll definitely have you back on, especially to talk about, you know what, Fox Hollow Farm. Let's do it coming up here soon. I definitely want to touch on that case, because not only is it paranormal, it's about a serial killer, and the paranormal decides to, haunt and give up the goods on the serial killer. But yeah, that is a very fascinating case. And we talked about the Greenbrier ghost, and we have also talked about cases like that. So I'll definitely have to have you on one of those kind of spooky true crime nights. But where can people get a hold of you? Do you have a website or something that somebody can go and check you out and email you?
I do. You can find me at richardestep.net. That's richardestp.net. And I love talking to people, so drop me a line. Let me know what you think. I'd be interested to hear it. Thank you.
Yeah. And actually, I will have a link for this book on today's program guide, so you can go ahead and check it out. And if you do buy the book, please rate and review. It's a must. You got to do it. Well, thank you so much, Richard. We'll definitely have to have you back here on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thanks again for joining us.
You too, Winnie. Thanks very much, and good night.
We've heard some of the darkest corners of human relationships. Remember this: behind every smile, behind every shared moment, lies a potential for darkness a few dare to acknowledge. The stories that we've uncovered serve as an unthinkable reminder that people closest to us can wield the sharpest blades of betrayal. In the quietude of our homes and the familiarity of our neighborhoods and our communities, danger lurks, wearing faces we trust. So when you go about your day and cherishing those warm family moments or the laughter with friends or the camaraderie of neighbors, tread lightly, for beneath the veneer of affection lies a world of secrets, jealousy, and resentment, waiting to erupt into violence. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you next week right here on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot on the Paranormal 60 Network.